Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I am so happy to be back in your ears, releasing episode every week after I took a little break. For those who haven't been following, I just had my baby just about 3 months ago now. So I took a little break and I am now back releasing episodes every week. So let's dive right into it. I am back this week with a new episode for this series Cuppa with a Pro, where I interview professionals who work within the pregnancy, birth and parenting sphere. And in today's episode, I am chatting with the lovely Beth. So Beth is a birth photographer and she takes us through what birth photography really is like. She takes us through the behind the scenes. So she really highlights what it is like, the process to hire a birth photographer, how it all works, what to expect in terms of pricing and the quality of images that you can expect to receive. And she also takes us through when is the best time to call your birth photographer on the big day, and also what it is really like to have someone in your space on the big day taking photos and documenting. As Beth puts it, her job is to document the birth as it's happening. So she's not about taking glamorous photos. She's not about making you pose. It's all about documenting the birth as it happens. So wherever you're birthing, whatever circumstances, whether it's bright daylight or it's nighttime, whether you're birthing in your intended place of birth or maybe not at all, it will be documented as it is happening. And without further ado, I will leave you to listen to Beth's episode. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. You are listening to Cuppa with a Pro, a new series on the podcast Cuppa with a Doula, where I chat with professionals working within the birth, pregnancy and parenting sphere, and we chat all about the area of expertise in the aim to try and raise awareness about very important topics that affect moms and moms-to-be, and also to help you to feel empowered to have the pregnancy, the birth and the parenthood journey that you want to have. Hi Beth, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi.
So do you want to start by introducing yourself? So telling the listeners your name, where you're living and what your work is, what your profession is.
Lovely. Yeah. Hi, I'm Beth and I am in the Hawkesbury, so the base of the Blue Mountains just west of Sydney, and I am a birth photographer.
Wow, that is a beautiful job, isn't it?
It is. It's very special.
Oh, that's amazing. So did you always want to be a birth photographer, or did that come about maybe during your own motherhood journey?
No. So I didn't want to be a birth photographer. I didn't even want to be a photographer. So I grew up, my parents have run a family photography business for 20 years now. So ever since I was kind of like preteen. And yeah, so I've always kind of grown up around the whole photography industry, and mum always would say, oh, one day you'll work with us, and I was like, nope, never. That sounds horrible. And I think it was more the idea of, because that's what my parents did, and I actually wanted to be a midwife. So I kind of actually did a work placement when I was about 15 or 16, which was definitely not legal. Not too sure how it happened, but the local hospital, I went and did like a week working there, and yeah, got to see a couple of vaginal births and a cesarean, and was just absolutely blown away. Just thought it was the most amazing thing ever, and was like, that's it, I want to be a midwife. When it came to finishing school, I kind of was talked into by some nurses that I knew that I had to do my RNs first. And so I went in, did 2 years of nursing and hated it.
Oh, right.
I just wasn't right. And so I dropped out after 2 years and I moved to the other side of the world and kind of just ran away from everything. And then, yeah, when I came back after I was in the UK for 4 years, and when I came back, mum was like, well, do you just want to come and work with us? We need some help anyway. So I started just kind of helping out with the photography side of things and then got invited by a friend to photograph her home birth. And then that's when it started. And I haven't stopped since. And it's been 3 years now.
Wow, that's a very interesting story because you had photography, at home, right? Like your parents
Yeah.
doing it, you would have seen what they're doing, what it's like. They would have took, like I don't know, cameras and
Yep.
editing. I don't
Yep.
know,
Yep.
and you had no intention, no drawing to that profession.
Yep.
Very
None
interesting.
at all. I just never would have expected, yeah, to end up in photography, but I absolutely love it. I'm so glad I did in the end. And I'm so happy that I kind of, in a very weird, roundabout way, ended up back in birth spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, basically, when you're forced into a profession because it's like, oh, well, I guess I'll just do that because my parents do it or because, I
Yeah.
don't know, it's easy.
Yeah.
You don't end up loving it,
No.
usually. I mean, there are exceptions, but, it's not something that you're like, oh, I'm thrilled about it, I'm passionate about it. Whereas, as you said, you had to take a few turns to then find out that it wasn't just photography you were into, it was birth photography, which is a whole different world there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just amazing that it kind of all ended up like that. And yeah, it's one of those jobs that you have to really love what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
You can't kind of just do it to pay the bills.
No, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, the commitment that it takes because, well, you're on call, like a midwife would be, like a doula would be. You're on call waiting for this mum to birth her baby, really. So, yeah, you've got to love
Yeah.
what you do because you're probably up at 3 a.m. with a call saying you've got to come in the next 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite often. It's always 3 a.m. for some reason.
Wow. So, are you an early bird then? Do you go to bed
No.
early?
I do go to bed early, and that has been since doing birth photography. I think I've just learned you're better off going to bed early and getting some sleep if it's going to happen. But yeah, I'm not. I never was before, and I'm only happy to wake up early if I'm getting called to a birth.
Oh, that's funny. And so in your own story, so you're a mum as well. Do you,
No,
oh, sorry, you don't have
no, no,
kids.
no,
Oh,
I don't.
beautiful.
Yeah, which
That's
makes my job a lot easier.
oh, see, here I am making assumptions. There you go. I should
That's
not be making
okay.
assumptions. That definitely means that yeah, you don't have to manage, childcare and so on. Amazing.
No, no, I've
Oh,
just got a very spoiled little dog
oh,
that does need just as much care as a child sometimes.
that makes sense.
Yeah. She gets very sooky when I leave. She knows what happens if I get a phone call in the middle of the night and she's not
Yeah.
happy.
Oh no, that's so cute. Oh.
Very cute.
Oh, very interesting. And so has do you think your job is maybe influencing on maybe your desire to have children or to not have children?
Yeah, it definitely I find it really funny. People not in like birth circles will say to me like, "Oh, does doing this turn you off having kids?
Yeah,
Like, does it make you just seeing people give birth, does it make you not want to have kids?"
yeah,
But it's the complete opposite. I feel like that like, that little slither of oxytocin dose that you get
yeah,
just from witnessing a birth. Yeah, just very much I walk away being like, I want to do this. And often I have a really good friend who is a doula.
yeah.
And I say to her all the time that I'm like, I'm not even sure I want a baby. I just want to give birth. Like it's like I see just especially home birth,
Yeah.
just women having these most amazing experiences. And I'm like, I want to experience that. So yeah, it's
Oh.
definitely makes me want to have children at some point.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, and as you said, I know you photograph in very different settings because you photograph in hospitals, in home birth, and maybe C-sections as well, so in a operating theater.
Yeah.
But birth can be beautiful regardless of the setting
Hmm.
if, there is the right environment, the right, people, the right atmosphere, the calmness, the, no rush, and so on. It can be really beautiful.
Yeah.
And as you said, well, you would have seen, it comes with a level of discomfort or pain, as some people would say, but it's, there's still those hormones, and that the contractions will not last forever, and then you've got this newborn baby that you've grown on you, and you're like, wow, it was all worth it, let's do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just amazing to witness that and get to document that as well. So, for families to then be able to look back and see all those really beautiful little moments during labor that they didn't really notice was happening, or, won't really remember. And yeah, it's always very special.
Oh, beautiful. So do you take just photos, or do you do videos as well?
So I have just this last year started adding in video. So originally I was just doing photos.
Yeah.
And then, I kind of started just slowly adding that in. It definitely is a completely different way of documenting a birth, and all new things that you have to learn and new way of editing. It's not as it's not as simple in my for me at least. And I guess especially in settings where it might be quite dark and I can use my flash on the camera to take a photo, but you don't have that for a video,
of course,
for example. So it's then being able to kind of still be able to document with like really low light, which is very hard. So I do both.
Oh, that's beautiful, because, well, as you said, when, the couple is in that bubble, there's things they probably won't remember from the labor, because they were in the zone basically.
Yeah.
And then you filming it, obviously photos they're just a snapshot in time. So, unless you've got like a string of them, it's not the same as a video. But if you have a video, you can go, so that's what I was doing, or that's what everyone else was doing while I was in my zone, and I didn't even notice that my midwife was right there, or my son was there, or whatever. That's so beautiful, so special.
Yeah.
But it would be a lot of work.
Yes. It's just a whole another element to kind of add in and kind of work with. So it keeps me on my toes. I never know what the space is going to be like when I walk into a birth. And even kind of you could photograph at the same hospital multiple times, and just, depending on if the windows are open or if, it's completely dark, like it's always completely different. Yeah, so it's just that kind of thing. You've got to kind of just work off what you have and know how to kind of just, figure it out as you go.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's start right at the beginning. So when people are looking at hiring you as a birth photographer, what's the process like? So obviously they get in touch with you and they say, I'm looking for a birth photographer. I'm due this month, this date. And so what's the process like from there on? How do they meet with you? Do they ask to see your portfolio? What is it like?
Yeah, so I get people who reach out first, and then I send over as long as I have availability. So I always make sure I'm available before sending them anything, and then I send them over my information pack, which is just a crazy amount of information that kind of goes through everything, and then I meet up with everybody before they book. And that is, if I can't meet in person, we'll do like a Zoom call.
Yeah.
But I always want to sit down and just have a really relaxed chat before booking, because I want them to feel like, okay, this is someone that I want in my birth space.
Exactly.
And I would feel comfortable. And I always say to everyone, not only am I a stranger that you're inviting in, but I have a camera. It's a whole nother level.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
you're going to be really vulnerable in front of me. And so I want you to feel comfortable. And so with that consultation, I say to everyone, you can walk away and go, this doesn't feel right, and that's fine. There's no pressure. But and some people do, and that is totally fine. But it's just a lovely way to sit down. We go through some example photos. So if they're planning a home birth, we'll go through some home birth like galleries. Hospital, we'll go through hospital. And we just kind of chat what their expectations are, any questions that they have. Just go through all that fun stuff.
Yeah. And so when they book you, so they decide to go ahead, right? Do you kind of have like a checklist for them in terms of, as you said, well, you can't you can't request, all the lights to be on, obviously, because it's a birth space and you've got to respect that. But do you kind of say it would make my job easier if there was, I don't know, like, do you know what I mean? Like, do you have
Yeah.
a bit of a checklist of what would make it better for photos or for videos, so on?
Yeah, not so much a checklist, but I definitely chat about, what will help me. And I do another consultation around 35 weeks. And so if that's a home birth, I'll go to the home so I know where I'm going
Makes
if I
sense.
get called at 3 a.m. Yeah, so I then sit down and kind of go through whole, like the lighting situation. Some people will say like, I want complete darkness, and that's totally fine. I have photographed births with like a single string of fairy lights. And so then we just chat about what those expectations of what the images are going to be. So in those situations, I am using my camera, I'm pushing it really to the limits to be able to capture those images. It also will be a bit slower in focusing because like your camera needs like that level of light to kind of pick up what to focus on. So I just say like things are going to be a little slower. There's going to be a lot more grain in the images. Some families, they're like, that's fine. I'm totally happy with that. I want it documented how it is. And, if it is a completely dark birth space, the photos will reflect that and they're still going to be amazing. So we just kind of chat about those expectations. I never would want someone to go, oh, I don't want any flash. I want it completely dark. But I'm expecting this level of image, which was taken maybe at daylight with, extra lights and all that stuff. So it's just kind of chatting about expectations and what would help me. And some people go with that and run with it and, fill the whole space with light, and others don't. And that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes back into I just don't know what I'm walking into. So yeah, it's always a lot of fun.
Wow. So do you have prompts like lighting, I don't know what they're called, the big umbrellas that reflect light and so on? Do you have those that you can bring into the space if that's appropriate, I'm guessing, to help, enhance the lighting? Or do you just go with whatever the environment is and not add anything to it?
I don't have any like big light to add in, and only because that would be quite like it would really affect the space. And one part of like documenting and capturing births is I'm not there to change anything, to influence anything. I'm just there to document. So what I use is like an on camera flash.
Oh, yeah.
And with that as well, it is never like pointed to whoever's giving birth, or it's always like behind me, off the ceiling, and like the lowest setting. So I'm very conscious of not distracting anyone, and like changing. It really is just to help get a little bit more lighting, to get a bit clearer images. But so I always say as well to everyone, I say if at any point you notice or distracted by the flash, you just look at me and I will get the hint and I will turn it off. Because but no one has yet even like if they notice it didn't bother them, or they don't even notice it.
No, that makes sense. So how would you go in a hospital setting, right, where you've got midwives, student midwives, doctors and so on, right? And I don't know, potentially they don't want to be on the photos. Can you work around them, or have you ever had any problems with the health professionals feeling uncomfortable with you in the room?
Sometimes, which is tricky. I don't I'm not there to photograph the stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
And I do make like very conscious decisions of like trying to just really focus on the family in those situations. I have had sometimes like midwives or staff members that have said don't no one is allowed to be in the photos, no kind of like faces or anything, and I'm very respectful of that. So it's that kind of, sometimes you do have people that are just really unhappy that you're there, and you just never know why. They might, for whatever reason. But then on the other end, especially at my local hospital, I have done a birth recently where the midwife follows my Instagram page, and so she was like so excited that I was there. And even in the end, it did end up in a cesarean, and as much as we all, even the like nurse unit manager was like fighting to get me into the cesarean to photograph, ultimately someone said no, cut it down on the other end. And so I gave this midwife my camera and she took some amazing photos. So it's really, you kind of get both sides. And I have had like really difficult situations where like it's like midwives will go out of their way to kind of block me and stop me kind of just doing my job. So I've had kind of blankets very purposely put in front of the camera, or people kind of stepping in front of me so that I can't take photos, which is always really hard because it's taking away this moment from that family, and it just makes it quite a very uncomfortable like environment in the room. So I have had some issues at certain hospitals. I find it's just people who aren't used to photographers and don't know why I'm there, or don't think that I should be there. So it can be tricky, but it's rare, which is good.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And I think, birth photography is it's more accepted. It's something that's not uncommon these days. And so therefore, hospital staff, and usually, the couple would have discussed it with the midwife if they haven't assigned one, or the midwives they see to say, I will have a birth photographer during my labor. But again, if you meet the midwife on the day you're in labor and she's never met you and she's reading for the first time, your birth preferences, for example, that's when she's aware that you're coming, basically. So wow.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I always say, especially if it's at a hospital, I say, let them know that I'm coming. So and in that case, if it's someone who's really against being in the room with a birth photographer, they can switch with someone else. And I find if it's on like a shift change and I'm already there, someone who's really against being in the room with a photographer is not going to come into like to be assigned to that birth. They're going to say like, I'm not comfortable with that. So, most of the time the people that are really against it do kind of avoid, but it's when sometimes you just kind of, that's just how it happens, and it has been communicated. But
that's very interesting, isn't it? Because obviously when you walk into a home birth, the private midwife would know that you're coming. She would be well aware of that, and that would be a whole different scenario there, where she probably wouldn't be trying to get in your way. She would be more than happy for you to do your job, and then she does hers, and everyone's happy because, they know that in the end you're both working in a different, arena to help that family with your own set of skills.
Yeah. And I've been doing this long enough that I know all the private midwives in my area. Worked with them. I've got ones that I get along with amazingly, and it's always exciting when we get to see each other at a birth. And there's one I joke around with that I've trained her up to with the mirror to angle it the right way to make sure I get good photos. And a lot of times they're like, come in, get closer, like get the shot, this is a good image, this will be a good photo. So it's a whole different environment coming into a home birth. And there's definitely some of my favorite midwives, I just get so excited for those births because they get to see them as well, and it's like seeing an old friend. So it's very different at a home birth.
Do you personally have a preference on the environment, I guess? Do you prefer to do home birth over hospital just because it's maybe a bit more welcoming as an environment?
So I love, I have documented some of the most gorgeous hospital births, and I would never say that I don't like doing hospital births, but the environment at a home birth is just so different. And I think when you have witnessed both, I think without witnessing home births, it's hard to understand why it would be different. It's you just giving birth, it's just it's so lovely when all the energy and space is being held for that mum, and it's just an amazing environment to come into and to then get to document. And especially one of my favorite things to document is kids at birth. I just absolutely love it. I love the little reactions and those little moments, especially during labor. I had one recently where she's 3-4 years old and kind of just was a little mini doula for a mum, and just giving her kisses and coming up and just right there during contractions, and then we'll go back to have a piece of toast. So just those little moments, I just absolutely
Yeah.
love. And yeah, one I photographed recently, and just there was like three kids, and after the baby was born, like they all just like hugged, and it was just like the
Oh.
sweetest, most genuine little like
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah.
And just getting to capture that is just, yeah, it's amazing.
And you wouldn't be able to, when you take family photos, right? You can obviously do it so it's not staged, and it's like, okay, but you just, as a family, you do your thing, and I'll just, photograph there. But you can't recreate that moment of meeting their sibling, and obviously your mom meeting, and obviously your dad as well, meeting their baby for the first time. You cannot recreate that
No,
when you take, for example, newborn photos, right? You
yeah,
just you can have the adoration look where you're just in love, and so on. But the moment of meeting your new baby cannot be recreated.
yeah,
It's, oh wow. It'd
yeah,
be so beautiful. Wow.
yeah. And it's just that genuine, pure
Yeah.
emotion, which is
Yeah.
just, yeah, so, so lovely.
Oh, amazing. So, I guess a question that can be quite common in your world is, I'm guessing for the most part, the people reaching out to you would be the mom. And so, what about the partner? Do you find when you meet with the couple, the partner may be maybe a little bit more reluctant, let's say, because, well, obviously it is an intimate moment. There is obviously going to be naked parts. Is the, partner, or maybe even the family, sometimes in the support team, there's the mom, there is the sister, there is the auntie. Do you find support people can be a bit reluctant to you being in the space initially?
Yeah, sometimes. So I find, yeah, definitely dads, I just don't understand. I think as like I know, especially in the 20s, 30s, you're kind of bombarded online with like people having babies and
Yeah,
like birth photos and
yeah,
all those things, and so you kind of like having your head like, oh yeah, like that's a moment I would love photographed. Like whereas like men, I don't think really get that. I don't know. I don't have a male social media page. But so a lot of times I think they're like, why? Like,
yeah,
why would we want photos of that? What, like,
yeah,
it's a lot of money. I just don't really understand. And a lot of times also they don't get the aspect of it being like documentary
yeah.
style. Like have had people book and then they'll be like, oh yeah, like, he was asking me like if you were going to pose us, like, and make us smile for photos. And,
Mm,
it's that kind of just doesn't
yeah,
really understand that I am there just to document
yeah,
what's
yeah,
happening. One of my favorite births, actually, the husband was very much like, this is too much of an expense. You can have a home birth or you can have a photographer. Take your pick. You can't have both. And he just didn't really
yeah.
see the value in it. And so, and I wonder if I should say this because I don't know if he does know to this day, but she paid me in cash and was just very like, we'll just tell him later on, it'll be fine. And yeah, so ended up photographing this birth, and it was just an
Oh,
absolutely gorgeous home birth. And he was over the moon.
oh,
Absolutely. Like those photos of not only him, like his reactions of like seeing his wife give birth, all the
mhm,
support,
yeah,
and then like he's holding his baby for the first time, like just those really, really special moments. And I think for him as well, like first time parents, home birth, their midwife lives about an hour away. So I actually came, I was the first one there.
yeah,
And I, for about 45 minutes, ran up and down the stairs with him, filling the birth pool up with water from the kettle because
yeah,
they ran out of hot water. So, and I think the fact that I was there to
yeah,
message him when he wasn't sure what to do. I was there to, brought along my kettle as well because we needed extra as much as we could. So I think just not only having someone there for that support, but also then like looking back on the photos, yeah, just like absolutely over the moon with it. So I think I always find the partners that are really don't get it and
yeah,
slightly against it at the start are like
yeah,
my biggest fans in the
yeah.
end.
That's a really good point, and you're right. Dads, they obviously have a different experience of pregnancy and birth, obviously, and yeah, they don't get exposed to the same, not messages, but to the same images, or to the same world that we do on social media. Where I think us as women, we, either we see those birth photos or we seek to see them because, it's like, oh, what is it like, to give birth? What can it look like? What can the environment look like, And yeah, it's very interesting. And, I could so imagine that when the dads see the photo of them, meeting their baby or seeing the baby crowning or they would, it would just, it'd be an amazing photo that, again, you can't recreate it. You can only capture it in the moment, but you can never recreate that. So,
Yeah.
so beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
And so that ties in kind of well with my next question, which was going to be, so you as a birth photographer, obviously, you document what's happening, but do you ever find yourself, again, depending on the needs of the couple, do you ever find yourself to be, physically supporting the couple if that's what they wish, or do you just tend to stay, in the background and just photograph? I'm guessing it's dependent on the family, really.
Yeah, definitely dependent on the family. And I do kind of like, I'm not a doula, and I never want to kind of like overstep lines and kind of, there is a very fine line of
Yeah.
supporting, and then possibly like giving advice when kind of you not really it's your space to give advice on. I definitely have had situations where I've had birth where, I'm literally watching obstetricians really put a lot of pressure on someone to agree to something that
Mm-hmm.
they just, don't
Yeah.
have, like, they're not processing it. So there has been a couple of times where I've just very gently been like, do you mind if we just have a minute to think? Like, and just to give them that space to
Yeah.
kind of have a chat with each other and decide
Mm.
what they want to do without that pressure of someone kind of standing over
Yeah.
them, expecting an answer straight away. And I also have been at births where the right thing to do was to put the camera down and just be a helping hand. I had a birth earlier this year, which was a home birth and very difficult labor. And just, she was in a lot of pain. And it got to the point where we decided to transfer to hospital, and everyone, like dad was running around because they didn't have a hospital bag packed. So he was trying to like throw things in a bag to take. The midwives was on the phone to the ambulance. So it was all these things happening, and the mum had been left in the room. And so I got into that bed with her and I held her hand and I just spoke with her and, just talking to her that like we're moving on to the next stage. You're needing that pain relief. We're going to get that pain relief. Like, and to this day, she said that like all she remembers is me there just like talking to her and just holding her hand. And that was just such a, like, just what she needed in that moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, similar, like, at hospitals, I've had dads that are quite squeamish and can't deal with needles. And so, you know what, like, if, that woman needs a hand to help, to hold, and just needs that support, I'm there. I'm not going to kind of just stand back and take a photo when someone needs, just a reassurance. And sometimes I am the most, like, I'm that known person in the room. They know me, they know that I know birth. And so just, sometimes, it's hard to not support.
No, that's
So
right.
I definitely jump in when needed.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And so you've alluded to it. So you can transfer with the mum if, the birth photography was meant to be a home birth, but now, the mum needs to transfer to hospital, so you would follow her to the hospital as well, right?
Yeah. And most of the time I don't have any issue doing that.
Yep.
I usually just jump in my car and
Yep.
follow the ambulance or follow their car, and we kind of deal with if I'm going to get let in when we get there. Most of the time, if you're going in with a private midwife, they just, they don't say anything. It just, there's this whole group that just kind of comes into the room. If
Okay.
I'm kind of like with the midwife, I just kind of sneak in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a long time since I haven't been able to go with a family. And most of the time when I was not able to, it was because of COVID restrictions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's especially this year, every transfer, which hasn't been a lot, there's only been 2, but I was able to go with both of them.
Good. Let's talk about birth, right? So birth is so unpredictable, obviously, and so you have to be on call, obviously, for that couple. But some women labor extremely quickly, and especially, I'm guessing, if you're photographing, second, third, fourth time mums where the labors are, potentially quicker. What happens, or have you not made it to a birth before and you've arrived after the fact?
Yeah, it's happened a few times. And yeah, it's always those second, third babies I find. And yeah, it's just birth is so unpredictable that yeah, it happens. One was even she lived 10 minutes up the road from me and we all missed it. So the midwife who also lived 10 minutes up the road missed it as well. And yeah, so in that situation, I just document as the birth is, which was really fast and no one was there. So I just kind of start taking photos as soon as I get there and just kind of, I usually will stay back later rather than I usually only stay for 2 hours after a birth. So I'll stay a bit longer and get a bit more. But yeah, it's only happened a couple of times for whatever reason. I wasn't meant to be there. And there's a really great photographer down in Melbourne. And she said to me once, she said, if you're not meant to be at a birth, like if you don't make it to a birth, you were not meant to be in that space for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And if you had been in the space, you don't know what would have gone differently. And so that's always really resonated with me that, if they call me too late and I don't make it for whatever reason, I wasn't meant to be there at that time. And yeah, so it's only ever happened a few times to me. There was one where the mum was being induced and the hospital was overnight, was not really believing that she was actually in labor. And so it pretty much, she was pushing and they were like, oh, okay. So then they rang her husband who was staying at home because she was in the maternity ward. And so he just jumped in the car and raced over. And the last thing on his mind was calling me. So I got a phone call that morning, was like, oh, the baby was born 20 minutes ago. So I just headed down and just kind of documented those couple of hours. And yeah, so I stayed a bit longer than usual. And yeah, I've had a couple of home births where it's just been really fast and no one expected it to be that fast. And a lot of times people are very much like, oh, in early stages of labor, and they're like, we've got time, we don't want to call everyone too early. And then that turns into it being too late.
Yeah, that's interesting, fast birth, because obviously when you meet with your the couples, you probably discuss packages, what it includes, how many photos and so on, and how long for the photos to be edited and so on. And then when there's a fast birth, that obviously changes the whole dynamic of your package, I'm guessing, because obviously you've missed the baby's birth for no one's fault usually, right? You can't be there if you can't be there. How does it go with your packages when things don't go according to plan, like a fast birth does?
It's tricky because, and I have a contract that everyone signs as well, which really goes through like birth is unpredictable. I cannot guarantee anything. And yeah, like sometimes my clients are like, I really want this shot. And, I say like, I will do everything I can, but I can't guarantee anything. But yeah, so in situations where like, I might miss an aspect of the birth, or like say it was a cesarean that I wasn't let into. I do my most to kind of document that story as it is. I do have kind of in my contract, it's like the full gallery is 200 plus images. So if I then get back, download all the photos and just go, I have nothing, which has happened really only once, where it was, I kind of got a phone call about 3 a.m. that they were about to head into a cesarean. So I went down, I was let into the cesarean, but I only had like a very small handful of photos before we went in the cesarean itself. And then baby was whisked off to NICU. And so I don't have any photos with mum and baby. And so what I then ended up doing was doing a newborn shoot for them, because I didn't have a whole lot of images. So kind of in those situations, I do kind of like add something on for them, but you can just never guarantee. And sometimes like it makes sense to do that. Other times it doesn't. So, sometimes I will possibly be there for 12 hours. And so in those situations, I still, as long as I still have enough images to really tell a story, then that is their birth story. But yeah, it's just one of those things, you just can never predict it. You just never know what is going to happen.
No, that's right. And so yeah, that leads into my next question, which is, you can be at a birth for a very long time. Do you kind of have an agreement, I guess, with the family to come at a certain stage in labor? Like maybe you come in during, active labor, because, well, we know labor can go for, it can be, even 30, 40, 50 hours. So do you come in at a specific, stage, or do you just come in when the family tells you, oh, I think you should come in now?
Yeah, so I tell people that you want me there for active labor. And that's also because I find if I'm there too early, people are too aware of their surroundings. So you kind of want me there once you're like quite well enough into labor that people being there don't really bother you. And that's just because I don't want people to notice me taking photos and get self-conscious, because that's what you tend to do when you see a camera and you notice it, is especially if they're not wearing any clothes or anything. Once you're in the thick of labor, you do not care. But early on, you can kind of feel a bit more self-conscious. So in those situations as well, if I do get called too early, I really will not take a lot of photos. And that's purely because I don't want to pull anyone out of that labor land and disturb kind of what's happening. So yeah, so I was very good at only, at timing it of where to go and prepping clients with when to call me. My longest used to be 12 hours. And then I've had a couple just recently of really long stints. And, it's all part of it. One, we were there from probably about 12 till 9 a.m. And then we made the call to all go home and just give them some space. And then came back at 5 that evening and then went home at about 1 a.m. So that was kind of like a long stint. And I didn't really go home and sleep. I went to work and I had another photo shoot that day. So it was all very a very long day. Yeah, so this year there's been a couple of kind of going and leaving and coming back. But yeah, it's all part of it, and you just kind of roll with it and do what you can. Lots of coffee.
Exactly right. And it's difficult, I mean, anything to do with birth and being on call is difficult in that you don't know when you're going to be called. You don't know when it's happening, and you don't know how long you're there for. You know what time it is when you walk in the door. You just don't know what time it's going to be when you walk out, and you're like, okay, now I can go to bed. Oh, wow. Let's talk about a really, really important thing in birth photography, almost like what we would call the elephant in the room. Let's talk about price, money. So I don't know about, you, but I don't like talking about money personally.
Yeah.
But let's address, basically, why is birth photography, expensive? Let's talk about that, because I'd like for you to tell, the listeners, how basically, for them to understand, I guess, that you are putting in an insane amount of work because of, being on call. Obviously, you there at a birth for X hours. Who knows what that number is? You've got to edit photos. There is an insane amount of work that goes into you being able to document and then deliver a gallery. So let's talk about how that's reflected in your pricing.
It's definitely one that's tricky. And I think it's a lot of people don't know what to expect with price for birth photography.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's still fairly new. So because it hasn't been around for that long, and it's only really been quite popular and mainstream, which it still isn't, but in certain circles, for probably only the last 4 or 5 years. So because of that, there's no kind of, expectation of price. And it's very tricky. You can find birth photographers from anything from a couple of $100. And that is usually people that are just starting out and just trying to get into the industry. And in that situation as well, it's hard. I photographed my first few births for free, and I regret that, only because of the amount of time that I spent at those births, editing those images and everything, I was able to share the images for marketing, which is why I did them for free. But my time that I put in, it was really, really hard. And so anyone who asks me, like, what do I charge for my first birth? I always say, like, something. Just charge something just to cover your time and cover your petrol and, you know, that, which is also a big step. So, yeah, you can then the other end of the spectrum is kind of around like $3,000-$4,000. So it's very different and everyone has their own budget. The things that the main price, the things that are high in it is actually the on-call time. And I think people are like, well, if I only have like a 4-hour labor and, you know, you're only there 2 hours afterwards, like that's only like 6 hours of work. You know, why is it, you know, in the thousands? And I think it's that I go on call at 38 weeks for clients and then I am on call until they have their baby. There's no cutoff point. There's no kind of like, oh, once you hit this mark, I'm not on call. So I have been on call for like 5 weeks, just waiting. And in that, I don't go far. I make sure that I'm around. I make sure my gear's ready to go. You know, I've got bags packed ready to leave. I always have to have like, you know, a full tank of petrol. It is also really draining being on call. And I think unless you do it, you don't really understand that kind of it's hard to explain, but it's kind of like you're constantly holding your breath waiting for something. And as a doula, you would understand that. It's just waiting to get that call is really exhausting. I am constantly checking my phone to make sure it's not accidentally gone on silent. And at night, there's sometimes I'll wake up multiple times a night just in a panic that maybe I've missed a phone call. So that kind of like, it's actually like the emotional drain is a big aspect of it. And then also just the fact that at any point I could get a phone call and I go, my births get priority. So I have been at my goddaughter's first birthday and I got a phone call and I left. And so there's, you know, a lot of my personal life gets put on hold and those clients are like my priority. So that's a big aspect. Another big aspect is backup. So I have an agreement with 2 other birth photographers that I really trust with my clients. And so they're my backup photographers. So if at any moment I'm sick or I'm at another birth or for whatever reason I'm not going to be able to get there, I have those people that I can send instead. And then that's something that then, you know, is factored into the cost because I'll be paying them to go to the birth. And yeah, so then the birth itself, you don't know how long you're there. And then also the editing. The editing is a big side of it. It's hours and days. Yeah, so it's kind of it is a lot of work that people don't see and don't fully understand. But yeah, it's one of those things. I always compare it to wedding photography in the aspect that it is capturing a very important day and moment that cannot be recreated. And so part of that is also that like my gear has to be up to, you know, like at the best level that it can be to capture it. I have backup cameras, which are thousands of dollars, you know, making sure all my cards are ready to go, all my software is good to not lose things, you know, afterwards. Very similar to wedding photographers. And people don't bat an eye to like $4,000 to $5,000, $6,000 to have like an 8-hour wedding captured. But for, you know, birth photography, because it is new and it's, you know, people don't really know what to expect, you know, I often will have people that are just shocked at the price. Yeah, so it's a tricky thing. And I feel so bad because I would love to photograph births for free, but unfortunately I can't. You know, it's not like it's one of those things that I wouldn't be able to just pay the bills with just birth photography as well, because you are limited on how many births you can book without then, you know, like chances of overlapping or just being burnt out, which is a whole big aspect as well. It's an emotional thing to capture. And I am the type of personality that takes on a lot of emotion. And so, yeah, I have to kind of limit that as well. So I'm not taking any past birth experiences into another birth. I have to be able to just kind of process it, move it on, and then, you know, each one has to be its own experience and I can't take anything into that space. Yeah, so that's kind of a big aspect of it as well.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for explaining that, because I think it's important to address obviously the price of it and to explain why you didn't just come up with the pricing you did, and you didn't just price it really expensive because, well, you want to afford a Lamborghini. Basically, there is a lot of behind the scenes work that is not reflected in the delivery of your gallery, basically. So when you deliver the gallery, it's not, as you said, people don't know that obviously you've been on call. Your social events have been, as you said, you've either had to cancel things or you've not attended things, you haven't gone on holidays, you've got to pay softwares, you've got to editing takes an insane amount of time. I would know that from editing this podcast, and that's a different story even. And obviously your time, you are giving your time to be present, to take photos, to obviously it's a very physical job. You're there on your feet or in awkward positions sometimes taking photos, and then you're editing them later, and that's hours and hours of work, and then there is travel and so on. So it's important to say that birth photographer, as you said, you can only take on so many birth a month or a year, because then they overlap, and then you can't be present to every single one of them, so that wouldn't be fair. So therefore it's priced for the on-call, your time, the editing, and it reflects everything, all the costs that you have as a birth photographer: camera, softwares, SD cards, backups, everything. All of that is hugely expensive. So thank you for explaining that, because I think it's important to just say it, and to just say you're doing an insane amount of work, and a beautiful one as well. So you deserve to be paid for it, definitely.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's very tricky, and I say to people that reach out, and then I might not be in their budget. Everyone has a budget,
Mm.
and you will
Yep.
always be able to find someone to fit into that budget. But it's that
Mm.
expectation. You can't expect someone who's charging maybe $500 to start out in the industry to deliver images that someone who's worked in the industry for years
Yeah,
has,
exactly.
really understands the birth space, understands the moments that are going to happen. It's a big learning curve.
Mm.
I have been in enough birth spaces that I can anticipate certain moments and certain things that are going to happen and be ready to capture those. Whereas in the early days when I was starting, there was a lot of little things that I would miss because I just wasn't expecting them to happen. And those galleries that I delivered are still absolutely gorgeous galleries. But now looking back, there's little things there that I didn't know the cues. I didn't know, what these certain moments were going to lead up to. So yeah, it's experience is also a big factor. So there's, and I always say like reach out, ask around, but there was a really good photographer in America who put something out recently, and obviously American prices are slightly different, but she kind of went through the different price ranges and what to expect from that. And so, the lower prices, like, around 500 is someone very much starting out. Between like around 800 and just over 1,000 is someone that's done enough births that they have like, a portfolio, but they are still learning, they're still finding their groove, still finding their edit style, kind of going the higher end of 1,000 into 2,000. Someone that's got a little bit of experience, they're quite confident as a birth photographer. Then when you're kind of going over the 2,000 range, that's when you're looking at people that they have their style, they have they're full time, they've got, a year plus experience in that, if not even more. And yeah, they've got the backups, they've got all the equipment that they need. Yeah, and then kind of going over the, 3,000 mark, that's when you're also looking at like the film aspect of it. As we spoke about at the start, it's like a whole nother level. So if you're kind of wanting your birth filmed, you're looking around high 2,000s, $3,000 for that. And that's just because of, the whole nother level there is of capturing a birth on video compared to just photo.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, videography is it's obviously nothing to do with photography. It's extremely different. It's a whole different setup, a whole different camera, I guess you'd call it. And as you said, it doesn't work the exact same way with lights and stuff. So extremely tricky, definitely. But it's good that you explained the pricing, so at least, the listeners can have a bit of an idea of what they're paying for, because as you said, there is a birth photographer for every budget, and I guess it's like everything in life, you get what you paid for as well.
Yeah.
And it's good to ask around and just to see. It depends, what the couple is wanting, what they're expecting, whether they're happy for a photographer that's just starting out, that's done maybe just a few births, or they actually really want someone like you, who knows the cues and knows those moments, and will just be able to photograph, everything really, or, try and capture everything, and won't be like, oh, I missed it because I didn't know that, this would happen at this time and so on, So yeah, good. It's good to address that. And so to finish this podcast, what is something we haven't touched on then? What would be a takeaway message, that you would have for listeners?
Yeah, I think if you are considering having your birth documented, look into it.
Yep.
Even if you're just trying to fall pregnant, there's no such thing as too early. Find a photographer that you love their style. You can reach out. I have people that reach out to me, 6 months before they end up falling pregnant all the time. But that way as well, they can start budgeting. They have had a chat with me. They know that there's someone that I'm someone they want to document their birth. I always say the amount of people that come to me regret not having a photographer for, whatever birth, they can never get those moments back. So I think if it's something that you're considering, I said, don't push away that consideration, and start looking into it as early as possible. And it's one of those things that, as I said, the moments, you can't get those moments back. And it is really, I haven't had anyone that has regretted having a birth photographer. But I think it's a very special thing to document, and a very, it's so special having those images to always look back on, and for your kids to look back on. I have a video of a little 1-year-old flicking through her birth album, and it's her favorite book to look through, and it probably will be something that she will look back on for years and years and years. And that's just very special.
And I think, it's important to reach out to birth photographers and ask about, pricing, and meet with them, and just investigate it if that's something that the couple or the woman is interested in, because as you said, you can never get those moments back. You can never recreate them. So if you're thinking about it, and, it's obligation free, meeting with you and asking, asking about your portfolio, what you do, your editing style and so on, and just seeing what's out there, and then just, sit with it, because, you probably, there's a bit of time before, the people can give you an answer anyway. And so, they can just meet with you, see, and then decide later on if that's what they want to do, or if they want to go with you, and so on. Yeah,
definitely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, on these beautiful words, I will finish it up here. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and telling us all about, your job, what you do, and everything birth photography. It's been really insightful for me, and I hope it will be for the listeners too as well.
Oh, good. No, thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely.
And I wish you all the best for your birth photography. I hope you have an awesome trip to America, and you can finally get a really good break from being on call for months.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're jumping back into birth photography as soon as you're back. So
yes, I am.
Are you on call until the end of this year, or maybe into next year?
Yeah, so I've only got a couple spots left for 2023. I think there's only 2 months that there's availability for. And already booked up into February for next year. So it's one of those things. Wow. I always say get in earlier rather than later, because it's always sad when I have to turn people away.
Wow, good on you.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, wow. Well, all the best to you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and look after yourself.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get notified of when a new episode comes out, please subscribe to this show on your podcast listening platform. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcast or share this episode so that other moms can find it. If you would like to tell your own pregnancy, birth, or parenting story, please head to the show notes and you will find a form there to get in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be with you again next week for a new episode.